So before we get into First Peter, I wanted to talk a little bit about what we call the Catholic epistles. So the Catholic epistles are one we've read already: James, First and Second Peter, First, Second, and Third John, and Jude. Um, these are all pretty short; they're brief. Um, they're called the Catholic epistles, using um, the Catholic as an adjective, not necessarily Roman Catholic as in the Pope and that sort of thing. But the word Catholic meaning universal or general. Sometimes they're called the general epistles. Um, you might recall in the Apostles' Creed, um, we say, "I believe in the Holy Catholic Church." And if you look in your hymnal on that, in the United Methodist hymnal, the Catholic is lowercase c, and there's even a little asterisk there, which says, which down in the footnote says universal. So, in other words, um, these are Catholic in the sense that they're for everybody. That's really what it means. Um, so they are not, unlike other letters in the New Testament, they're not addressed to a specific church. They're not Paul to the church in Rome, right? They're not Paul to the church in Galatia. This is Anybody can read this and find that's the intent of them, at least. Anybody can find this and read it, and it's helpful and edifying and useful. Um, Not that Romans and Corinthians and Galatians aren't, but these ones don't address particular contextual concerns, such as Paul did in First Corinthians, where he's gives them his kind of his opinion on should you eat meat sacrificed to idols, which sounds really niche because it is, because that's a debated conversation they were having in Corinth at the time. And so rather, the Catholic epistles have this sort of more general emphasis on faithful living. And it's a nice tie-in with the Pauline epistles. You bring them all, epistles means letters. Bring all these together, and you sort of create a fuller picture. So we're now in the middle of the Catholic epistles. So um, uh, First Peter is really interesting historically, I think. The authorship is usually given to Peter, the disciple, Jesus's right hand man. He says, "The uh, You're the rock on which I'll build my church," and he becomes the first in the line of popes. Peter was the first pope. So the the question is, well, did Peter actually write this? And we've had this debate, or this conversation, I should say, about several of the epistles. Um, the Greek used in First Peter is highly sophisticated Greek. Um, is Was that possible for a first century Palestinian fisherman? Maybe, maybe not. If it wasn't Peter himself actually writing, it was definitely a scribe of Peter or some kind of assistant or a disciple in Peter's circle. This is very close to Peter if it's not Peter himself. Um, Again, he was the first pope, and so his name, just attaching Peter's name in the late first century, after Paul has died, most likely, his his name, Peter's name, carries more weight than just about anybody else in the late first century in Christian circles. So it would be no surprise if a someone close to Peter, and probably with Peter's permission, wanted to attach Peter's name to this to give it some heft. So historically, this is where I think it's really interesting. It's written in Rome and then circulated to other churches. So today we think of the Catholic, and now when I'm saying Catholic, I mean the Roman Catholic Church. Um, the Roman Catholic Church is centralized in Rome. Um, but in the first century, we don't see really any centralization of Christianity. There's a centralization of Judaism in Jerusalem, but as far as Christianity goes, it's these churches popping up in different places. But here we see the very first inkling of some of that centralization in Rome. Here's Peter, sort of the bigwig of the church in those days, based in Rome, writing letters which theoretically could be used by anybody, and circulating them out from Rome. And so you see those very first steps of centralization in Rome coming. Um, and you see how that has shaped the Catholic Church through the centuries, with Peter in Rome. And Peter is uh, buried in the Vatican, in St. Peter's Basilica, which is the center of the Vatican, and the Vatican is in Rome. So just some interesting history that goes along with this. So First Peter, again, this is a general epistle. This can go to anybody. This can go to the churches in the area in those days, and it can come to us and give us some really important wisdom and insight. Just some bullet points here. Vision of a Christian life in First Peter. Vision of a Christian life, and sort of the ethics of being a Christian. That's rooted in this idea of death and resurrection. Um, that there's hope and salvation, and there's newness and new creation and recreation, and all these things that are rooted in this central idea that we have of resurrection. So Peter really affirms that, living lives of integrity, risk suffering and alienation if necessary, but also willing to give a transparent witness of hope and good works to the world around it. So that is First Peter.